Everyone. My name is Beyla Khabensky and I'm a senior here at George School. And today I'm very excited to share with you my experience persisting through the pressure of perfection. But before we get started, I have a very important question for everyone. Are you ready? Have you ever gone skiing? Please raise your hand. Great, that's like everyone. Awesome. You can lower your hands. If you're wondering why I'm asking such a seemingly random question, it's because I've gone skiing almost every winter break for my entire life. And so, growing up in the local area, so close to the Poconos Mountains, skiing in the winter is as typical as carving pumpkins for Halloween. However, for me, skiing is something I typically lose sleep over as the holiday season inches closer every year. Even at the mention of the word skiing, all that comes to mind are my swollen feet stuck in ski boots, my freezing nose and burning legs, and the arduous trek back to the ski lodge when my legs are nothing short of Gumby. Mostly, though, I hyperfixate on sounding lame when my sister begs me to join her on the more difficult slopes. And it's not because I'm afraid. Just to be clear, I'm not afraid. It's because, well, I know that she's better than me. And she can't be better than me. In fact, no one can be better than me at absolutely anything. Growing up as a first-generation, firstborn American to immigrants from Ukraine and Kazakhstan, I have been deeply aware of the profound impact of my parents' hard work and dedication. As they overcame language barriers, sought out educational opportunities, and achieved economic independence all on their own as they integrated into American society, my parents' resilience and fearlessness has given me countless opportunities and privileges, and in return, to honor their efforts, I've strived to achieve my full potential in every aspect of life. However, as I aim to excel in whatever lies ahead of me, the pressure to succeed and the often unattainable expectations I continue to set for myself find me as a perfectionist. Since then, I've grappled with this label, never truly knowing if it was a positive or a negative trait, as it consumed me from the inside, but led to praise, validation, and reassurance on the outside. But even that was never enough. I always hated hearing people say, well, everyone's good at something, right? Because in the back of my mind, I knew that I had to be good at absolutely everything. And although I know this is basically the most unrealistic thing in the world, I have driven the idea of attaining perfection so far into the ground that at only 17 years old, I'm already struggling to climb out of the darkness. And so, the reason why I wanted to share my experience skiing is because on my most recent ski trip, I've given myself the time to reflect on how perfectionism influences my daily life, but also, acknowledging my imperfections has given me the ability to accomplish more than coloring inside the lines ever did. And now, this is not like a revelation I had the second I stepped foot on the mountain. In fact, my ski trip experience was quite different, as with months leading up to it, my sister couldn't hold back her excitement, and I knew that I probably wouldn't make it down the first green without my legs giving out. And that was true. In fact, down the first drop, my left leg went completely numb from all the layers of thermals and ski socks I decided to shove down my boot. And although I persevered for about 45 more seconds, I was parked on the side of the mountain with about 3/4 of the way still to go, hysterical because of how much pain my legs were in. But you know what's even more embarrassing than watching 7-year-olds pizza down the mountain as if it's looking up with foggy, tear-filled goggles at your dad and your sister as they hover over your absolutely helpless body. And as perfectionists, we will do anything to succeed if it means preventing the exposure of our vulnerability and our incapability. In that moment, I hated myself. I hated myself for the fact that my sister, who is 3 years younger than me, was skiing without an issue. I hated myself for the fact that I made it through every single ski trip by gritting my teeth and biting my tongue just to make sure everyone had their fun. And I hated myself for the fact that now I had to live up to the consequences after all these years of struggling. Even now, standing in front of all of you today, I feel so exposed. But I can't help but wonder what my 7-year-old self would be looking up at me with right now. And all I can think of is disappointment and betrayal. How could you ever admit to being bad at skiing? In fact, how could you ever admit to being bad at anything at all? Come to think of it, The only times I've really ever allowed myself to be bad at something was if it had to do with my personal growth or emotional well-being. And I know this sounds bad, but these are the marks I typically got from people. You need to find a way to manage your anxiety, lower the pressure you put on yourself. You need to find a way not to set your expectations so high. And here's my personal favorite. You need to be kinder to yourself. Because in the back of my mind, I was like, these are basically compliments. Like, come on. If I was succeeding academically, athletically, personally, socially, whatever it may be, then it was essential for me to have these negative qualities in order to achieve success. Or in my case, it was really just checking the boxes. And so, by getting rid of this mindset, this strict mindset I already had, I believed it would loosen the reins on the ambition and drive that I already instilled in myself. And at that point, I just end up losing control of everything. And that's another thing about us perfectionists. One thing we're really big on is control. And so, by degrading myself until I could prove I was the best at everything, led me to be known as a goody two-shoes, the person that was sat in between two disruptive boys in class, the person that was used as the role model, the example. And on the bright side, this allowed me to establish a much higher status amongst the adults or teachers in my life, but it was absolutely punishing amongst my peers. And so as I searched to find the balance between validation between the adults and the students and peers and friends in my life, I realized that I shouldn't have been doing that at all. Because as I fulfilled the stereotype of an ideal student, an ideal athlete, an ideal daughter, I lost who I was and could only recognize myself through the perception of others, through the perception other people had of me. Even in times through the rebellious middle school into early high school phase when everyone's like, I don't care what anyone thinks of me. I couldn't care less if people thought I was bad at this, good at that. Even in times when I was a risk taker, in times when I've previously stood on this stage and showcased my vulnerability to the entire school, even now, I've always had this undermining pressure, this shadowing pressure to remain likable and unblemished despite everything I say. And so I took this mindset into my ski trip, where I would make it through by gritting my teeth and biting my tongue just to make sure everyone had their fun, and I'd suffer just to ensure the happiness of others. But once the leg pain went from, manageable cramping to absolutely violent shaking down the classic East Coast, no longer a snow but an ice slope, I knew I had to confront myself about my limitations and come clean to my sister. And the truth is, both of us were left in disappointment. I didn't live up to her expectations, and as hard as I tried not to beat myself up over the fact that I wasn't good enough, I tried much harder to realize that my life's experience, that your life's experience, cannot be lived through the validation of others, because at some point, you forget what you're truly living for. And this realization also made me realize the fact that by living my life through the experience of others, I wasn't really living my life. And the bitter truth is that my happiness, that your happiness, your heartbreak, and the authenticity of your entire life has and will always be separate from everyone else's. And so this inspired me to regain control of my life. But here's the issue with the word control. There's a common misconception that it means structure, power, order. It's rigid like a tree that can withstand wind, rain, thunder, lightning, even battles of heat and drought, and have had its strength endured for thousands and thousands of years. But as we chase to set our lives into stone, to follow a straight, narrow path, in our own rigid pursuit of direction and humanity, our weakness in control is illuminated when we ourselves snap like a twig. Because the reality of it is, the trees that survive and withstand thousands and thousands of years are the ones who actually sway in the wind, with the wind, but not the ones whose own inflexibility collapses under the weight of its own fragility, or in our case, in our fear, or because of the pressure we put on ourselves to be perfect in everything. I've been a track and field athlete for the last 4 years, 7 seasons, going into my final one. And before every big meet, my coach says something that I've never really grasped, I think, until recently. It's never really resonated with me because I didn't really understand how it applies. He'd always say, give yourself permission to set a PR. Or in other words, give yourself permission to succeed. And I'm like, that's kind of ridiculous, right? No, like, you don't need to give yourself permission, you just go and do it. Like, if you want to succeed, it comes from an area of force, of control. You just go and you do it because that's what your mind and your body and your heart has trained for, but no. If you ask any athlete, they will tell you, when they set a PR, they do not know how or what happened in that moment. We will forget everything about it. And when your coach says, go do that again, you're like, well, I don't know what I just did it, right? Because in that moment, you're letting go of all your inhibitions, and you're trusting the fact that your mind, your body, your heart is capable of doing what it needs to do because you've worked for it, you've trained for it, it's your passion. Real control is giving yourself the freedom and trusting yourself to do what you know you're capable of. And so, this has also taken me from someone who has broken their leg hurdling in the state finals their sophomore year, and by acknowledging the fact that, yeah, I couldn't walk, the fact that I couldn't run, it motivated me to get back on my feet, to work harder, but it didn't turn me away. I didn't check the box of winning a state meet. I didn't even place. But I was motivated enough, I was passionate enough to face my imperfections and not only relearn how to walk, how to jump, how to run, but I learned how to throw. A new passion was ignited inside of me. I met new amazing people. And with that, I proved to myself that I was capable of succeeding in something I never even bothered to try. It took me from someone who was afraid to speak my entire life. And by using that acknowledgement that I was so afraid, and use that again as motivation to enroll in my high school's public speaking course, where once again I found this new passion, something that I was finally good at. And I used that as inspiration to then attend Stanford University this summer, where not only did I get to roast my public speaking professor as part of my final exam, but it was one of the greatest experiences of my entire life. As someone with many imperfect voices and ideas and just imperfections in general, I'm still someone who takes those inhibitions and those limitations and those things I'm so afraid of as a way to keep going. It has taken me someone that can use things like screenwriting to talk about my heritage, to talk about how I cope, to express myself and not be afraid despite what other people might say. Or I can create ridiculous but incredibly inspired Mel Brooks spoofs and turn them into something like a parody of the Terminator. Or on the other hand, I can have the courage to create a documentary about the humanitarian crisis against weaponry and violence and show a completely another side of myself to the world. Even if it is something as simple as standing up to your sibling knowing that it will end in both of yours disappointment, whether it's standing in front of all of you today, but not to prove that I am fearless, not to prove that I am better than who you expected me to be, but because I'm in control of my own journey. Because all that perfection is, it's a destination. And if you're with me, we're not finished enjoying the ride. Thank you.